I used to work as a data analyst at a big tech firm in Seattle. It was one of those jobs that looks amazing on paper: good pay, flexible hours, remote work, and a clear promotion path. But I was dying a little every day. Every sprint, every meeting, every deck I made felt like I was adding bricks to a wall I didn't even want to be near. I was 29, single, and even though I had a nice apartment and a stocked 401k, I spent every Sunday night dreading Monday like it was a dentist appointment that never got canceled. What kept me sane was Dungeons and Dragons. I played every week with a group of friends I'd known since college. We weren't hardcore, but we were consistent. I'd always been obsessed with dice. There was something magical about them: polyhedrals with sharp edges, glittery resin, weird color blends. I had a small collection, nothing crazy. One day during lockdown, I bought a cheap dice-making kit on Etsy just to try it. I poured my first set in my kitchen, using food coloring and glitter I stole from an old arts and crafts box. They were ugly, bubbled, and totally off balance, but I was hooked. It felt like alchemy. I started watching YouTube videos, learning about pressure pots, resin curing times, mold making. I got better fast. My kitchen turned into a chemistry lab. At some point, I had 40 sets of dice in shoe boxes and zero plan of what to do with them. Then my friend Jamie, our group's DM, said something that flipped a switch. "These are better than the crap I see on Etsy. You should sell them." I laughed it off. But that night, I looked at some of the dice sellers on Etsy and Instagram. Most of them weren't even trying hard: blurry photos, sloppy descriptions, sets priced all over the place. I realized there might be an opening. I opened a shop under the name Dragon Math Dice. Terrible name, but I didn't care. I listed 6 sets at $30 each. They all sold in a week. It wasn't profit yet, but it was proof. For the next 3 months, I worked 9 to 5, then made dice from 6 to midnight. I refined my technique, upgraded my tools, learned a brand. I bought a decent camera. I opened an Instagram and posted daily. I joined Reddit groups like r/D&D and r/ResinCasting and started sharing my work. People began messaging me asking for commissions. I made a waiting list. Then I made a spreadsheet to manage the list. Then I hired my 16-year-old cousin to help me pack and ship orders because I couldn't keep up. Here's the part where it gets stupid. I quit my job. I had saved about $40K. My business was making $2K/month in revenue, with about $1K of that being profit after materials, shipping, and fees. It was the dumbest financial decision of my life, but it felt right. I didn't want to let it die on the vine because I was afraid. The first 3 months were euphoric. I made dice all day. I experimented with UV glow effects, dried flowers, even miniature skulls inside the D20s. I launched a website. I started a newsletter. Then I got my first 1-star review on Etsy and spiraled for a week. The customer claimed their dice were ugly and uneven, and even though it was just one review, it felt like someone sucker punched me. That's when I realized I needed to scale like a real business, not just a hobby shop. I read every book I could on niche product marketing. I took a Skillshare course on brand storytelling. I learned how to use Google Analytics and spent 2 weeks deep diving into what parts of my site people clicked and ignored. Turns out, people loved dice sets that had themes. Not just blue sparkles, but Arctic Serpent or Cursed Library. So I started naming every set and writing a story for it. Sales doubled almost overnight. Then I nearly poisoned myself. Resin is toxic when mixed improperly. One night I was rushing a large commission for a wedding party, 25 custom sets with dried rose petals, and I forgot to turn on my fan. I got a migraine, dizziness, and eventually vomited into the utility sink. I had to go to urgent care. The doctor gave me a long lecture, and I took it seriously. I invested in a full ventilation hood and proper PPE. Safety became part of the brand. I even made a behind-the-scenes video about my setup that ended up going viral on TikTok. By year 1, I was making $5K a month in profit. Not revenue. Profit. I hired my cousin full-time. I bought a second pressure pot and a custom-built drying rack. I got a tiny studio space outside of my apartment. We launched a Kickstarter for a new line of Elemental Mythos dice. Goal was $10K. We hit $38K. But here's the weird thing. I still felt like an imposter. I kept waiting for someone to out me as a fake. Like, who was I to be running a business? I didn't have an MBA. I didn't know how to do taxes beyond TurboTax. I still felt like a guy in a room full of chemicals and glitter. Eventually, I got a mentor through a local small business accelerator. She was blunt. She said, "You're not a guy making dice. You're building a brand that delivers joy through storytelling and design. Stop thinking small." That hit me hard. So I stopped thinking small. I rebranded as Mythic Makers, hired a graphic designer to redo the logo and packaging, partnered with a small Canadian wood shop to make handcrafted display boxes. We launched a monthly subscription box called Roll of the Month. Subscribers get an exclusive themed set, a mini-story zine, and a collectible coin. We sold out in 72 hours. Today, we're a team of 4. We've shipped over 12,000 dice sets worldwide. We have recurring customers from Finland, Brazil, and the UAE. We just signed a licensing deal with a popular fantasy author to make a dice line based on her novels. Our profit this year is on track to hit $160K. Sometimes people from my old job message me like, "Dude, are you really just making dice now?" And I get it. It sounds absurd, but I've never felt more alive. Every week I get emails from people saying our dice made their first game magical, or that they gave a set to their partner as a proposal gift. One guy even said he carries our Infernal Pact D20 in his pocket during job interviews for luck. If that's not real impact, I don't know what is. If you're reading this thinking about jumping ship, don't do it blindly. I took a massive risk, and I wouldn't recommend it without savings, a bit of traction, and a plan. But if your soul is shriveling in your cubicle, and there's something weird you love that others might pay for, test it. Try it. Tinker. Because sometimes the dumbest little obsession can become the smartest move of your life. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. This is the story of how I went from being a broke college graduate with no job prospects to building a successful online business that now generates over $1 million in annual revenue. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were plenty of ups and downs along the way, but I learned a lot, and I'm hoping my story can help someone else who's just starting out. I graduated college in 2015, during a time when the job market was still recovering from the Great Recession. I had a degree in communications, but as most people know, a degree in communications doesn't exactly guarantee a job. I spent months applying to every entry-level position I could find, but no one seemed interested in hiring a recent grad with no real-world experience. I was broke, living with my parents, and feeling pretty hopeless. One night, after getting rejected from yet another job, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I'd always had a passion for technology and the internet, and I started toying with the idea of building an online business. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. I didn't have any technical skills, and I certainly didn't have a lot of money to invest in something that might fail. But then, I stumbled across a YouTube video that changed everything. It was a tutorial on how to create a simple dropshipping store on Shopify. For those who aren't familiar, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products online without actually holding any inventory. You partner with suppliers who ship products directly to your customers when you make a sale. The idea of running an online store with minimal upfront investment sounded perfect, and I decided to dive in. I spent the next few weeks researching everything I could about dropshipping. I watched countless YouTube videos, read blogs, and joined Facebook groups to learn from others who had already tried it. The more I learned, the more I realized that it was going to take a lot of work. Dropshipping wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme. I would have to learn about e-commerce, digital marketing, and customer service, all while building a brand from scratch. I decided to take the plunge and invested my last $500 into setting up my Shopify store. I chose a niche that I was passionate about, fitness, and started looking for products that I could sell. I used a tool called Oberlo to find suppliers, and within a few days, I had my first online store up and running. The next step was to get traffic to my website, and that's where things started to get tricky. At the time, I didn't have any money to spend on paid advertising, so I had to rely on free methods like social media and SEO. I started creating content on Instagram and Facebook, posting workout tips and motivational quotes, and linking back to my store. I didn't get much traction at first, but I kept posting every day and engaging with my followers. After about a month of posting consistently, I finally made my first sale. It wasn't much, just a $20 order, but it was a huge milestone for me. I couldn't believe that someone had actually bought something from my store. That small win gave me the motivation to keep going. Over the next few months, I continued to improve my store, optimize my marketing, and test different products. I learned a lot about customer behavior and the importance of having a great user experience on my website. I also started running Facebook ads, which helped me scale my traffic and sales. By the end of the year, my store was making around $2,000 per month in revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover my bills and give me some financial freedom. I decided to double down on my business and reinvest all of my profits back into it. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service, and I expanded my product offerings. In 2017, I took a big risk and decided to launch my own brand. I had been selling generic fitness products, but I realized that in order to stand out, I needed to offer something unique. I worked with a manufacturer to create a line of custom-branded fitness apparel and accessories, and I launched a new website to sell them. The launch was a huge success. Within the first week, I made over $10,000 in sales, and by the end of the month, I had recouped all of my initial investment. From there, my business continued to grow rapidly. I started outsourcing more tasks, like content creation and order fulfillment, so that I could focus on scaling. I also began to focus more on building my brand and creating a loyal customer base. One of the keys to my success was creating a strong social media presence. I invested heavily in Instagram and Facebook ads, and I worked with influencers to promote my products. I also started building an email list, which became one of my most valuable assets. I sent out weekly newsletters with fitness tips, product recommendations, and special discounts for subscribers. By 2018, my business had grown to the point where I was able to quit my day job. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had always wanted to be my own boss, but I had never imagined that it would happen so soon. I was still working 80-plus-hour weeks, but it didn't feel like work because I was building something that I truly cared about. In 2019, I made my first $1 million in revenue. It was a huge milestone, and I couldn't believe how far I had come. But I knew that success in business was never guaranteed, so I kept pushing. I continued to optimize my marketing strategies, launch new products, and experiment with different sales funnels. The most important lesson I learned throughout this journey is that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, whether it was spending money on ads that didn't convert or choosing the wrong products to sell, but I learned from each failure and used it as an opportunity to improve. Fast forward to today, and my business is a 7-figure brand with a team of 10 people. We sell a range of fitness products and apparel, and we've expanded into new markets, including Europe and Australia. I'm still passionate about fitness and helping people live healthier lives, and I'm constantly looking for ways to improve and grow my business. Looking back, I never could have imagined that I would be where I am today. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, but I pushed through and kept going. If you're thinking about starting your own business, just remember that success is a journey, not a destination. It will take time, and there will be setbacks, but if you stay focused and keep learning, you'll eventually get there. So, this is the story of how I went from being a broke college dropout to running a multi-million-dollar tech startup. It's not your typical success story, but the journey was crazy, humbling, and ultimately worth it. I'm sharing this to hopefully inspire someone out there who feels stuck or thinks it's too late to start their own business. I didn't have a smooth start. I wasn't one of those kids who always had a dream of becoming an entrepreneur. I wasn't even really into tech. Growing up, I was always the quiet, nerdy kid who preferred reading or gaming over sports or hanging out with a crowd. My parents pushed me toward a traditional career path: go to college, get a degree, get a job. But the more I went through school, the more I realized that this wasn't what I wanted. The moment that changed everything was in my sophomore year when I dropped out. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I had been thinking about it for months. I hated the rigid system of college. I felt like I was wasting time studying subjects that didn't inspire me, and I wasn't learning any real-world skills. On top of that, I had this nagging feeling that the whole get a degree, get a job model wasn't going to cut it anymore. It was 2014, the tech boom was happening, and everyone was talking about startups, innovation, and tech giants. I couldn't help but feel I was missing out on something big. So one morning, I walked into the dean's office, told them I was dropping out, and walked away. I didn't even know what I was going to do next, but I knew I needed to get out there and figure it out. The first year after dropping out was rough. I lived in a small apartment with no job, no clear direction, and not much money. But I had one thing going for me, an obsession with learning. I spent most of my time consuming anything I could find about startups, technology, and business. I read books, watched TED Talks, and listened to podcasts about successful entrepreneurs. I figured the only way to succeed was to learn as much as I could about everything, and eventually, something would click. One night, while scrolling through Reddit, which was, and still is, my go-to source for knowledge, I stumbled upon a post about a new tech tool that was changing how small businesses operated. It was a simple customer relationship management, CRM, software, but it had an intuitive interface and was tailored specifically for small businesses. I had no idea about CRMs at the time, but I was fascinated by how something so simple could revolutionize a small business. This was the spark I needed. I started learning everything about the CRM industry. I spent hours diving into forums, talking to small business owners, reading reviews, and comparing different CRMs. Over time, I realized that while there were plenty of CRMs out there, most of them were either too complex for small businesses or too expensive. That's when the idea hit me. What if I could create a CRM that was specifically designed for the mom-and-pop shops and freelancers who couldn't afford or didn't have the time to use these bloated systems? I had no money to fund this idea, but I had a small network of people from online forums and Reddit who I'd been talking to about tech. One of them, a freelance developer named Ben, agreed to help me build the first version of the software. I didn't have a business plan, just a rough vision of what I wanted to create. Ben was the first person who took me seriously, and we spent the next few months working nights and weekends on the prototype. I was living on ramen noodles and doing odd jobs to make ends meet while Ben was coding away. By the time we had a basic version of the software, I knew we were onto something. The challenge was getting people to try it. We had no marketing budget and no reputation. So, I turned to Reddit and started posting in small business subreddits. I offered the software for free in exchange for feedback. I wasn't looking to make money yet, just to get some real-world testing and testimonials. The response was overwhelming. People loved the simplicity of the software. They appreciated that it was designed specifically for their needs, and they loved that it didn't have all the extra fluff that made other CRMs hard to use. Over the next few months, we refined the software based on user feedback, and slowly, word of mouth started to spread. Once we had a stable product, I knew it was time to start charging for it. But I wanted to do something different. Most CRM companies offer tiered pricing with a bunch of features that small businesses don't need. I decided to create a flat pricing model, one price for everyone, no matter the size of the business. This way, small businesses wouldn't feel like they were being taken advantage of. I also introduced a 30-day free trial, so people could try it without any risk. In 2016, after about a year of growing our user base and getting real feedback, we officially launched with a paid version. Within the first few months, we had over 1,000 paying customers. It was a small number, but it was enough to prove that the model worked. I started reaching out to investors, and after a couple of rounds of meetings, we secured our first seed funding. It wasn't much, just enough to hire a small team, improve the product, and start marketing more seriously. Over the next few years, we kept growing steadily. We focused on customer service, simplicity, and building strong relationships with our users. Our software became known for being the easiest CRM to use for small businesses. By 2019, we had raised a Series A round and were on track to hit $10 million in annual revenue. It wasn't an overnight success, but the consistent, steady growth was what kept us going. In 2020, things really took off. We had expanded into new markets, built integrations with popular e-commerce platforms, and started offering advanced features that were still easy to use. The pandemic forced a lot of businesses to shift online, and many of them turned to our software to help manage customer relationships remotely. That year, we hit $50 million in revenue. The next year, we were acquired by a larger tech company for $200 million. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how far we've come. It wasn't a smooth ride, and there were so many moments where I thought I was about to give up. But every time I hit a wall, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. I had no experience, no safety net, but I was determined to make it work. Now, I'm using the lessons I learned from running my own business to help other startups, and I'm proud of what we built. For anyone reading this who's considering starting a business, my advice is simple. Start small, stay focused, and don't be afraid to fail. It's easy to get discouraged when things aren't going your way, but every failure is just a stepping stone to success. If you can make it through the tough times, the rewards are worth it. Just keep going. Thanks for reading. I started my business journey in 2015. At the time, I was just a regular guy working a 9-to-5 job at a corporate office, barely getting by, and feeling like I wasn't living up to my potential. The company I worked for was great, and I had a decent salary, but I always felt that something was missing. I'd heard people talking about entrepreneurship and building something from the ground up, and I'd get this itch in my brain wondering, what if I could do that? But, like most people, I had zero idea where to start. I didn't have any special skills, I didn't have any investors, and most importantly, I didn't have any entrepreneurial role models in my life. The people around me, even though they were good folks, were content with their 9-5s, and none of them had experience running a business. I felt like a lone wolf with this dream that I couldn't share with anyone because, frankly, I didn't even know what I was trying to do. It wasn't until the summer of 2015 that I stumbled upon something that completely changed my perspective. One day, I was browsing Reddit, yes, that infamous rabbit hole we all get sucked into, and I found a post about someone starting an online business. It was a relatively simple post, but the more I read about it, the more intrigued I became. The guy wasn't talking about tech or anything groundbreaking. He had built a successful side hustle by selling custom t-shirts on Etsy. I remember reading his story and thinking, if he can do it, why can't I? At the time, I didn't even own a computer good enough for design work, but I felt a spark that I hadn't felt in years. After work that day, I started to research how to sell online. I looked into platforms like Etsy, eBay, and even Shopify. I watched countless YouTube videos about creating and marketing products. I realized that the only thing stopping me from starting a business was myself. I didn't need a ton of capital. I didn't need to quit my job. I just needed to take the first step. I took that step in the form of a tiny investment, about $200. I spent that money on a basic graphic design course on Udemy and a few materials to try my hand at making simple products. At first, I wasn't even sure what kind of business I wanted to build. Should I sell t-shirts, mugs, or something else? I was all over the place, experimenting with different products and designs. I even bought a cheap heat press machine and some blank shirts, just to see if I could print anything remotely decent. The first few months were, to be honest, an absolute disaster. I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't research my target audience well enough. I didn't understand the marketing aspect of things. I thought that if I just created a product, people would come flooding to my store. Spoiler alert, that's not how it works. The t-shirts I created were too generic, the designs were unpolished, and my marketing efforts were basically non-existent. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. The drive I felt in those early days was enough to keep me pushing through the failures. I started doing more in-depth research. I spent hours reading blogs, watching interviews with successful entrepreneurs, and analyzing the best-selling items on platforms like Etsy and Shopify. I joined forums and Facebook groups where people talked about the struggles of starting a business and shared their successes. Then, I had a breakthrough. One day, while browsing a Reddit thread, I stumbled upon a niche, one that I knew I could connect with personally. It was a small community of people who were passionate about vintage cars, specifically classic Mustangs. I knew I had a personal connection to this group because my dad had restored a few classic cars when I was a kid, and I'd spent countless hours working on cars with him. I decided to tap into that niche. I designed a series of vintage-inspired t-shirts featuring iconic Mustang logos and sayings related to car culture. This time, I didn't just upload the designs and wait. I did the research. I learned how to use social media to my advantage. I posted on car enthusiast forums. I used Instagram and Facebook to target car lovers with ads. Slowly but surely, my product started to gain some traction. But even when the sales came in, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first few orders were exhilarating, but they came with their own set of challenges. I was still working a full-time job, and managing orders, customer service, and production all by myself was a grind. There were weeks when I barely had time to sleep. I'd work my day job from 9 to 5, then spend my evenings and weekends printing shirts, packaging orders, and running social media campaigns. But every time I made a sale, it felt like a mini victory. After a year of grinding away, I finally hit a tipping point. My side hustle was no longer just a hobby, it was a legitimate business. I had enough income coming in that I was able to quit my corporate job and focus on it full-time. That decision wasn't easy, though. Leaving a steady paycheck was terrifying, but I knew deep down that this was what I wanted to do with my life. I had built something from scratch, and it felt like I was finally living on my terms. The business continued to grow, and I eventually expanded beyond just t-shirts. I added hats, posters, and other products related to car culture. I outsourced the production to a manufacturer so I could focus on the creative and marketing side. I hired my first employee, a graphic designer, to help me scale up the product offerings. As I reinvested the profits, I watched the business grow year after year. Fast forward to today, and I now run a multi-six-figure business. It's a far cry from the corporate job I left behind. I still have moments where I can't believe it all started with just $200 in a random Reddit post. There have been countless hurdles along the way, failed products, customer complaints, long nights working alone, but there's one thing I've learned. Persistence is key. You're going to fail 1,000 times, but every failure is a lesson that brings you closer to success. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, start now, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. The perfect time will never come. Just take the first step, even if it's scary. If you keep pushing forward, eventually the pieces will start falling into place. It's been an amazing ride so far, and I wouldn't change a thing. I'm proof that anyone can start a business, no matter how inexperienced they are or how small their initial investment. All you need is a dream and the determination to make it happen. A few years ago, I found myself at a crossroads in life. I was working a corporate job that I had climbed the ranks in for nearly a decade, but something wasn't clicking. Every day felt the same routine, the same office politics, the same lack of fulfillment. I had always dreamed of doing something different, something I could call my own. I wanted to build something meaningful, something that wasn't dependent on someone else's whims or rules. But let me rewind a bit. I wasn't always this ambitious. I had never been the entrepreneurial type growing up. My parents were always pushing me towards stability, security, and a traditional career. Go to school, get a job, buy a house, that was their mantra. So I did what was expected. I went to college, got a degree in business administration, and landed a solid job at a reputable firm. At first, it felt great. I was making a decent salary, had a nice title, and seemed to be on the fast track to a bright future. But over time, things started to change. The excitement of getting that paycheck every 2 weeks wore off. The promotions didn't feel as rewarding as I thought they would. I had all these ideas in my head, but no outlet to express them. I wanted to innovate, to create, to build something from scratch, but I wasn't in control of my own destiny. I started to resent the idea that my success was entirely tied to the whims of higher-ups who didn't even know my name. One evening, after yet another miserable day at the office, I found myself scrolling through Reddit. I've always loved the platform for its vast array of stories and perspectives. It was on this evening that I stumbled upon a post from an entrepreneur who had quit their 9-to-5 job to start a small online business. They detailed the ups and downs, the fears, the failures, and ultimately, the success they had built. It clicked for me. I realized that I was in the exact same position, stuck in a job I didn't love, yearning for more, and this person had made a bold decision to take control of their life. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I researched different types of businesses, watched countless YouTube videos, and read articles on how to get started. There was a lot of information out there, but it all boiled down to one thing: taking the leap. It was easier said than done, though. I had bills to pay, a mortgage, and responsibilities that made the idea of quitting my job terrifying. But as I thought more about it, I realized something. The risk of staying in my current situation was far greater than the risk of failure. So, I decided to make the leap. I didn't quit my job immediately, but I started working on my side hustle during the evenings and weekends. I had always been passionate about fitness and health, and I'd noticed a growing trend of people turning to online platforms for fitness advice and coaching. I thought, why not combine my love for fitness with my business knowledge? After doing more research, I decided to create an online coaching business. The idea was simple. I would offer personalized fitness coaching, create workout plans, and provide nutritional advice to clients through an easy-to-use app. I started by building a website, using a free template, since I was on a tight budget, and putting together a list of services I could offer. Then, I created social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook to start building an audience. I posted fitness tips, workout videos, and motivational content to engage people. At first, it was slow. I didn't have any clients, and the only interaction I got was from a handful of friends who were just being supportive. But I kept at it, posting regularly and offering free content that provided value. A few months in, I saw my first real breakthrough. I had posted a short workout video on Instagram, and it somehow went viral. I gained hundreds of followers almost overnight. I was getting messages from people asking for personal training advice, asking about my services, and even paying for a few customized workout plans. I was thrilled, but also terrified. This was happening faster than I expected, and I wasn't fully ready to handle it. I quickly learned that running a business wasn't just about offering a service, it was about managing all the logistics, the marketing, the client communications, and the finances. My days were consumed with working on my business after my 9-to-5 job. There were weeks where I barely slept. My mind was constantly racing with new ideas, tweaks to my business, and things I needed to improve. It was overwhelming, but I loved it. The real turning point came when I reached out to a friend who had been successful in business. I asked for advice, and he told me something I'll never forget. Stop trying to do everything yourself. You can't scale a business by doing it all. That piece of advice hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been trying to juggle everything, creating content, responding to clients, handling the website, and marketing all on my own. I realized he was right. If I wanted to scale, I had to get help. I hired a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks, and I outsourced some of the content creation. I also started investing in paid ads to grow my reach. As I focused on the bigger picture, creating a better experience for my clients and expanding my brand, things really started to take off. Within a year, my side hustle had grown enough that I felt confident enough to quit my corporate job and take my business full-time. The transition wasn't easy. There were still challenges, like managing the financial ups and downs of entrepreneurship, dealing with difficult clients, and constantly adapting to the ever-changing digital landscape. But I had a sense of freedom that I never had before. I was my own boss. I was doing work I loved. And most importantly, I was building something that was truly mine. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I have a solid client base, a small but amazing team, and I've learned more in the past few years than I ever did during my time in the corporate world. I've had my share of failures, but those failures have taught me invaluable lessons. I've learned how to pivot, how to manage risk, and how to keep going even when things get tough. Looking back, I realized that the scariest part of this journey wasn't the fear of failure. It was the fear of never trying. I'm so glad I took that leap, and I wouldn't change a thing. If you're reading this and you're feeling stuck or unsure, my advice is simple: take the leap. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just start. You'll learn as you go, and the reward of being your own boss is worth every struggle along the way. If I can do it, anyone can. I used to be a regular guy, working a 9-to-5 job in a small cubicle in a big, soulless corporate office. But let me tell you how everything changed for me. It was not some grand plan, not some big eureka moment. It was more like a slow burn. A series of mistakes, luck, and lessons learned along the way that made me realize what I really wanted in life. This is the story of how I went from being stuck in a dead-end job to building a successful business that I truly love. It all started about 5 years ago. I was fresh out of college, pumped to start my career. I landed a decent job at a marketing firm that had just the right amount of prestige on paper. The salary wasn't amazing, but it was steady, and I was happy with the benefits. I thought this was it, the job that would set me up for life. But in the back of my mind, I always felt like something was missing. For the first couple of years, I didn't really notice. I was busy learning the ropes, building relationships, and trying to climb the corporate ladder. But then, as time went on, I started feeling the weight of the monotony. I was spending 8 hours a day sitting at my desk, doing the same thing, day in and day out. I wasn't contributing anything meaningful, and I certainly wasn't passionate about the work. My creativity felt stifled, and I was simply going through the motions. It wasn't just the job that was getting to me. It was the entire culture of the company. There was a constant pressure to hit arbitrary sales targets, endless meetings that could have been emails, and a toxic work environment where people pretended to care about the company but were really just focused on getting their bonuses. People were miserable, but no one dared to speak up. The thought of spending the next 30 years like this, working for someone else, stuck in a rat race, was suffocating. And then one day, something happened that completely changed my perspective. I was at a bar with some friends after work, venting about how miserable I was at my job, when one of them, who had been running his own online business for the last few years, gave me some advice that I'll never forget. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You can build something of your own. It's going to be hard, but you can do it." At that moment, I felt a spark of hope, but I didn't really understand what he meant. I had always dreamed of owning a business, but I thought it was too risky, too hard. What would I even start? I wasn't a tech genius or a brilliant marketer. I didn't have a ton of money saved up to invest, but he convinced me to think about it. He told me about the power of online businesses and how anyone could start with just a small investment and scale over time. I went home that night and started doing some research. I watched videos on YouTube, read articles, and listened to podcasts. The more I learned, the more I realized that my dream of entrepreneurship wasn't as far-fetched as I had thought. There were so many success stories of people who had started from nothing and built thriving businesses. But here's the thing. I didn't know what kind of business I wanted to start. I didn't have a product or a service in mind. But I knew one thing for sure. I wanted something that would give me freedom. Freedom to make my own decisions, control my schedule, and have a direct impact on the work I was doing. After a few months of contemplating, I decided to try my hand at e-commerce. I started small, way smaller than I would have liked. I found a niche I was passionate about, customizable home decor, and built a simple online store using Shopify. I didn't have a huge marketing budget, so I started with organic traffic. I spent hours on social media, building an audience, posting content, and reaching out to influencers who might promote my products. It wasn't glamorous at first. In fact, it was downright discouraging. I remember launching my store and waiting for sales to come in, only to see nothing, not a single order. I was devastated. It was like I had put all this effort into creating something, and it felt like it wasn't going anywhere. But I didn't give up. I kept tweaking the website, refining my product descriptions, improving my photos, and working on my social media presence. Slowly but surely, I started getting traction. People started noticing my products, and they began to buy. The first sale felt like an absolute victory. I felt like I was on top of the world. I was doing it. I was building something. But even though I was making sales, I quickly learned that running a business wasn't as easy as I had imagined. There were so many moving parts: inventory management, customer service, order fulfillment, marketing, finances. It was overwhelming at times, and there were so many moments where I questioned whether I could keep going. There were late nights and countless mistakes. But every time I hit a roadblock, I learned something new. As my business grew, I realized that there was no one else I could rely on but myself. Sure, I had a few freelancers helping with things like design and copywriting, but when it came to the big decisions, it was all on me. I had to trust my instincts, but I also had to be prepared to make hard choices and accept that not everything was going to go smoothly. The key was persistence. Eventually, the hard work started paying off. My sales picked up. My brand gained recognition. I was able to quit my job and focus on my business full-time. But the success didn't come overnight. There were months of grinding, experimenting, failing, and learning. And now, 5 years later, I've turned my little online store into a thriving business. I have a small team that helps with customer service, logistics, and marketing. I've expanded into new product categories, and I'm even looking into other business ventures. I'm not a millionaire yet, but I'm on my way, and the best part is, I'm doing something that I love. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that nothing is as easy as it seems from the outside. Entrepreneurship is tough. It's not just about starting a business. It's about staying in the game when things get hard. It's about learning from your failures and using them to build something better. But most importantly, it's about taking that first step, even when you're scared. So, to anyone out there who's stuck in a job they hate, or who's thinking about starting their own business but is too afraid to take the leap, I get it. It's terrifying and it's not easy. But trust me, it's worth it. If you have an idea, even if it's not perfect, take that first step. You never know where it might lead. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be telling your own story of how you built something incredible. I'm living proof that it's possible. I always thought success was something that happened to other people, not someone like me. You know, the ones who had the perfect idea, the perfect timing, and the perfect connections. I was just a regular guy with big dreams and a small bank account. But somehow, despite all the odds, I ended up building a company from scratch. This is my story. It all started when I was in college. I wasn't the best student, but I wasn't the worst either. I'd pass my classes, maybe even do a little above average. But when it came to my passion, I knew I had something more to offer. I'd always been into tech and gadgets. My friends would come to me for advice about the latest phones or computers, and I'd have an answer for them. So it was clear to me early on that tech was where I was going to focus my energy. After college, I found a decent job at a mid-sized tech company. It wasn't anything glamorous, but it paid the bills. I spent my days troubleshooting issues, designing software features, and doing what I could to stay afloat in the sea of corporate bureaucracy. But it wasn't where I wanted to be. I was just a cog in the machine, not the one driving it. One night, while working on a side project at home, I realized something. I'd been solving problems for other people, but I wasn't solving my own. I had a problem that seemed small at first, but it kept growing. I was constantly ordering tech accessories online, and every time I did, I was either waiting weeks for delivery or paying ridiculous amounts for shipping. Why was it so hard to get affordable, fast delivery for tech accessories? Why was there no simple platform for all of them in one place? That was the moment the idea for my business was born. At first, it was just a hobby. I spent my nights researching the market, sketching out what my platform could look like, and slowly but surely, the idea started to take shape. I would create an e-commerce platform where people could find affordable tech accessories, get fast shipping, and have a seamless experience when buying the products. I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I was just trying to make the wheel spin a little faster. I spent months working on my business plan, but like most people in the early stages of entrepreneurship, I had no idea what I was doing. I remember being overwhelmed by all the moving pieces, product sourcing, website design, marketing, legal work, you name it. My savings were running low, and I was living paycheck to paycheck, unsure if I could actually pull this off. The hardest part was convincing myself that this was even possible. Who was I to think I could build a successful business? I wasn't some Silicon Valley genius or a millionaire investor. I was just a guy with a dream. But slowly, I began reaching out to people who could help. I found a couple of mentors who had experience in e-commerce and tech. One of them suggested I start small, build a minimum viable product, MVP, and test it in the real world before going all in. Taking that advice was a game changer. Instead of diving in with a full-fledged platform, I built a small website and partnered with a handful of manufacturers. I didn't have the resources to stock inventory, so I started dropshipping, where products were sent directly from the supplier to the customer. It wasn't the ideal solution, but it was a way to get started without needing huge upfront investment. The launch was a mix of excitement and anxiety. I was ready, but I was also terrified that no one would buy anything. But within the first week, I made my first sale. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. People were interested. Over the next few months, I slowly built my customer base, working tirelessly on improving the website and offering better products. Each small win felt huge, and every failure was a learning opportunity. Then came the moment I'll never forget. A couple of months into the business, I received an email from a major tech influencer. He had stumbled upon my website, liked the products, and wanted to feature my brand in one of his videos. At first, I thought it was a joke, but after a few exchanges, I realized this was the real deal. The feature ended up going viral, and overnight, my website was flooded with traffic. Sales went through the roof. It was the break I needed, but it also came with its own set of challenges. My supply chain, which had been working fine on a smaller scale, was suddenly overwhelmed. I had to scramble to find better suppliers and faster shipping methods. I worked day and night to make sure my new customers received their orders on time. I was still a one-person operation, so the stress was immense, but it was also a rush. This was the moment I knew I couldn't go back to my old job. I was in too deep. The next few months were a blur. I reinvested every penny back into the business to improve the website, expand my product range, and hire my first employees. I remember the first time I hired someone. It was a part-time customer service representative, and it felt like a huge step forward. Slowly, I started to delegate more responsibilities, and as I did, I was able to focus on growing the business even further. But success didn't come without its hurdles. As the company grew, so did the pressure. I had to navigate everything from cash flow issues to employee management, all while trying to keep up with the ever-changing tech industry. There were moments when I thought about giving up, when the stress seemed too much to bear. But every time I hit a wall, I found a way to climb over it. Fast forward to today, and I'm the CEO of a growing tech accessories brand. We've expanded internationally, and I'm no longer working 16-hour days on my own. We have a team of talented individuals who are as passionate about the business as I am. It's not always easy, but I've learned that the journey is just as important as the destination. Looking back, I never imagined I'd be here. I didn't have the perfect idea or the perfect timing. But what I did have was determination, grit, and the willingness to learn from my mistakes. I may not have been born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I built something I'm proud of. And now, I'm ready for whatever comes next. If I could offer one piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment. Start with what you have and learn as you go. The road will be hard, but if you stick with it, it's worth every step. This is a story about how I went from being a broke, out-of-work 24-year-old to building a successful online business that generates six figures annually. There were no shortcuts, no magic formulas, and a lot of failures along the way, but looking back, every single setback was a lesson that got me to where I am today. I'll start from the beginning. I had just finished college with a degree in business, which, ironically, made me feel completely unprepared for the real world. I didn't have any job offers lined up, and honestly, I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. Like a lot of people my age, I had dreams, but no clear direction. My friends had gone off to traditional 9 to 5 jobs, and here I was, struggling to find anything that could give me a sense of purpose. After several months of applying to positions that I either didn't want or didn't get, I realized I needed to take matters into my own hands. I always had a passion for technology and had dabbled in web development in my free time, so I decided to dive headfirst into learning digital marketing. I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials, reading blogs, and following the advice of people who had found success online. It wasn't glamorous. My days were filled with trial and error, often feeling like I was spinning my wheels. But the more I learned, the more I realized that starting an online business could be the key to achieving the financial freedom I was seeking. So, in the spring of 2016, I took the plunge. I built a simple website using WordPress, focusing on an online niche I thought had potential: eco-friendly home products. I remember being excited, but also terrified. I had no experience in e-commerce, and I didn't have much money to invest in the business. My budget was under $500, and it had to cover the website hosting, some basic tools, and my first round of ads. I didn't even know how to run Facebook ads properly, so the first campaign I launched was a complete disaster: 0 clicks, 0 sales. I was on the verge of giving up when I decided to invest in learning how to advertise the right way. I signed up for a comprehensive Facebook ads course that taught me everything I needed to know. The first few weeks were incredibly humbling. I spent hours tweaking my ads, learning how to target the right audience, and testing different copy and images. My sales were slow at first, but they started to trickle in. I remember the first sale like it was yesterday. It was a $25 order for a bamboo toothbrush. I was ecstatic. That $25 was proof that my idea wasn't stupid and that people would pay for something I was passionate about. But even though I had made my first sale, the business was still far from profitable. I was spending way more on ads than I was making in revenue. After several months of struggling, I decided to rework my entire approach. Instead of focusing on trying to sell as many products as possible, I shifted my strategy to building a community. I started creating more engaging content on social media about sustainability, eco-friendly living, and the importance of reducing waste. Slowly but surely, my audience began to grow. My Instagram account started to gain traction, and my followers began engaging with the content I was posting. I learned that people didn't just want to buy products, they wanted to be part of a movement. As my following grew, so did my sales. I launched a product line that was exclusive to my online store, and with a more refined marketing approach, things began to take off. One of the keys to my success was focusing on email marketing. I started collecting email addresses through lead magnets, free guides, discounts, and eco-friendly tips. Slowly but surely, I built an email list that would become the foundation of my business. The first time I sent an email campaign out, I had a 20% conversion rate. That's when I knew I was onto something. In the beginning, I was working from my cramped apartment, often staying up late to manage orders and answer customer inquiries. My life was consumed by the business, but every sacrifice felt worth it. I remember hitting my first $10,000 month, and it felt unreal. It was hard to believe that I had gone from being a broke college graduate with no job prospects to running a business that was generating real revenue. Things didn't stay easy, though. The reality of scaling a business hit hard. My supplier went out of business, leaving me scrambling to find new partners. My website crashed during a flash sale, causing a significant loss in revenue for that month. My Facebook ads got banned twice, and I had to rebuild my ad account from scratch. But through each challenge, I kept going. I learned how to pivot, how to adapt, and how to keep a level head in stressful situations. By the end of 2018, my business was making consistent 5 figures a month. I had grown to a small team of 3 employees, and I was finally able to take a step back from the day-to-day operations. But the growth didn't stop there. I continued to reinvest into the business, scaling my product range and refining my marketing tactics. By 2020, my business was pulling in over $100,000 a month in revenue, and I had been able to step away from the business to focus on growth and partnerships. As of today, my business is generating multiple six figures a year, and I'm fortunate to have built something that allows me the freedom to live life on my own terms. I don't work weekends anymore, and I've built a solid team that handles most of the operations. But it wasn't easy. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments when I doubted myself, and times when I thought about throwing in the towel. But I pushed through, and now I look back on it all with gratitude. The most important thing I learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work, persistence, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. There will be times when you feel like giving up, but that's when the magic happens. If you're willing to put in the work, keep adapting, and stay persistent, you can create something incredible, even if you don't have the perfect plan from the start. I guess the point of this story is to say that the entrepreneurial journey is far from easy, but it's incredibly rewarding if you stick with it. It's not always about having the best product or the most groundbreaking idea. It's about solving a problem, creating value, and staying committed to the process. If I can do it, you can too. Just keep pushing and don't ever stop learning. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was always that kid who had dreams bigger than his reality. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I often found myself daydreaming about what I could do with the world. I didn't come from money, and my parents didn't have the type of connections that would give me a head start, but I was always fascinated with how businesses worked. My dad ran a small car repair shop, and my mom worked at the local bank. They were hard workers, but they had no interest in the corporate world. The best I could do was watch YouTube videos of people who had made their fortunes, those entrepreneurs who seemed to come from nowhere and built something incredible from scratch. I knew deep down that I wanted to be one of them. Fast forward to college. I was studying business administration, but I wasn't exactly excelling. I was more interested in side hustles than assignments. I had a few gigs going here and there, but none of them really took off. I had an eBay store for a while, selling old electronics and random stuff I picked up at garage sales, but it was more of a fun distraction than a real business. That all changed one summer when I came across a problem in my own life that I thought I could solve. It all started when my laptop broke. I had saved up a little bit of money, and I was planning to buy a new one, but I was also dealing with student loans and trying to make ends meet. I didn't want to drop another $1,000 on a new laptop, so I started looking for used ones online. It was a nightmare. Every time I found something that looked good, it would either be sold out or have a broken part. After spending hours trying to find something that fit my needs, I had an idea. What if I could create a marketplace for used electronics where everything was tested, inspected, and guaranteed to work? I told a couple of friends about the idea, but most of them thought it was a dumb idea. They said people would just buy new items instead of dealing with used ones. But for some reason, the idea kept gnawing at me. I spent the next few weeks obsessing over it, doing research into how the used electronics market worked, learning about the logistics, and figuring out how I could make it better than the current options. I started calling up local repair shops to ask about their business models and how they handled inventory. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that there was an opportunity here. So, I took a leap of faith and used every penny I had saved to buy some used electronics, laptops, phones, tablets, anything I could get my hands on. I found a small garage to rent out for cheap and started testing the devices, repairing the ones that needed fixing, and listing them online. It wasn't glamorous. My first office was a dingy little space with bad lighting, a workbench, and just enough room for my supplies. But I didn't care. I was doing what I loved. The early days were rough. I had no brand, no reputation, and barely any customers. I spent hours writing detailed product descriptions, taking high-quality photos, and offering unbeatable warranties on my products. My goal was simple. I wanted people to trust me. If they bought from me, I wanted them to feel like they were buying from a professional. I also started offering a 30-day return policy, something I didn't see many other places offering for used electronics. Sales were slow at first. I think I sold a few items a week, but it was enough to keep me going. I started reinvesting every dollar I made into more inventory, better tools for repairs, and paid advertising to get the word out. I created a website with a simple design and focused on building an online presence. The real breakthrough came when I realized I could use social media to drive traffic to my store. I made a Facebook page, an Instagram account, and even started running some Google ads. Slowly but surely, people started noticing me. I got my first positive review, then another. Soon, word of mouth started doing its magic. After about 6 months of grinding, I had enough customers to hire my first employee. I was relieved to hand off the repair work to someone else, as it was taking up most of my time. This allowed me to focus on growing the business, improving customer service, and expanding our inventory. That's when I decided to create a brand identity, something that would set us apart from the other businesses in the market. I hired a freelance graphic designer to make a logo, and we branded ourselves as Reboot Electronics, a company that breathed new life into old tech. Once I had the brand in place, the next step was scaling up. I knew I needed to move fast to capture more market share, so I secured a small loan to move into a larger warehouse space. With the extra room, I could hire more staff, expand our inventory, and start working on bigger projects, like offering tech support and repair services. I started working on partnerships with manufacturers and wholesalers, which allowed me to offer better deals on parts and tools. Reboot Electronics wasn't just a marketplace anymore. It was a full-service hub for all things tech. The business really started to take off once I launched a subscription service for refurbished laptops and phones. It was simple. Customers could subscribe to receive a device upgrade every year. This created a steady stream of recurring revenue, which was a game-changer for cash flow. It also attracted more people who didn't want to deal with the hassle of constantly upgrading their own tech. Over time, we expanded even further. I built an app to streamline the buying and selling process, added live customer support, and worked on SEO to drive organic traffic to our website. By this point, we were generating several $100,000 a month in revenue, and the business was growing faster than I could have ever imagined. We even got featured in a couple of major tech blogs, which was a huge win for us. Fast forward to today, and Reboot Electronics is one of the largest refurbished tech companies in the country. We have a warehouse with over 50 employees, a fully functional e-commerce platform, and a loyal customer base. Looking back, it's crazy to think about where I started. I still remember the feeling of selling my first refurbished laptop for $150, and now we're doing millions in revenue each year. But none of it would have happened if I hadn't taken that first step, no matter how scary it was. The road wasn't easy. There were plenty of nights where I doubted myself and wanted to give up. But I kept pushing, kept adapting, and kept learning. Today, I know that entrepreneurship isn't just about having a good idea. It's about persistence, learning from mistakes, and constantly striving to improve. And most importantly, it's about believing in yourself, even when others don't. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I can tell you this: don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for all the pieces to fall into place. Just start. You'll figure it out along the way, and before you know it, you'll be living the dream you once only imagined. I had an idea that I thought would change my life, but I had no idea how hard the journey would be. This is the story of how I started a tech company from scratch and eventually built it into a successful venture. The road was full of challenges, failures, and doubts, but looking back, it was all worth it. Here's how it happened. It all started during my last year of college. I was studying computer science, and like most students, I was consumed by the thought of securing a stable job with a big company after graduation. But there was always something in the back of my mind telling me that I could do more, that I could create something of my own. One night, while coding a project for class, I had an epiphany. What if there was a way to automate mundane tasks for small businesses? The idea seemed so simple, yet revolutionary. I spent the next few weeks brainstorming and researching the concept, trying to figure out how I could make it work. I came up with a basic idea for a software solution that could help small businesses automate their administrative tasks, things like scheduling, payroll, and customer communication. It wasn't a groundbreaking idea, but I thought there was potential to improve existing solutions. The market was there, and the competition wasn't as fierce as in other industries. At first, I didn't take it seriously. I was just a college student with no business experience, no funding, and very little technical know-how outside of what I'd learned in class. But one evening, I decided to test the waters. I reached out to a few small business owners I knew in my town and pitched the idea to them. Surprisingly, they were receptive. Some even said they'd be willing to try it out if I could build a prototype. That's when things started to get real. I was still finishing up my degree, so I worked on the project during my free time. I had no formal business training, so I spent a lot of time reading articles, watching videos, and trying to learn everything I could about the startup world. There was so much to learn about marketing, sales, finance, and customer support. I had no idea how to handle customer service or pricing models, and I definitely didn't know how to manage cash flow. The first version of the software was basic, barely functional, to be honest, but it was enough to get some small business owners to sign up. They liked the idea, and they were willing to give me feedback, which helped me improve the product. I kept working on it while finishing my degree, and by the time I graduated, I had a small user base and a few paying customers. It was enough to keep me going, but I knew that the next step was going to be crucial. With graduation behind me, I faced a difficult decision. Do I go find a real job in tech, or do I take the plunge and try to turn this idea into a full-fledged business? I spoke to a few mentors and peers, and everyone had mixed opinions. Some told me to go for it, saying that I was young and had nothing to lose. Others advised me to play it safe and get a job in the industry first to gain experience. The uncertainty was overwhelming, but I ultimately decided to go all in on the business. I got to work on improving the product full-time. I hired a part-time developer to help me with the code, and I started learning about marketing. I remember spending hours drafting emails, reading up on SEO, and running Facebook ads on a shoestring budget. I was wearing all the hats: CEO, developer, marketer, customer support, and even accountant. It was exhausting, but I didn't know any other way to do it. The first few months were tough. There were weeks when I didn't make a single sale, and I started doubting myself. Was this really going to work? I'd get a flurry of sign-ups one week, only to have half of them drop off the next. I wasn't sure if the market was ready for what I was offering, or if I was just not doing a good enough job convincing people. I spent hours talking to customers, trying to figure out what they liked, what they didn't, and how I could improve the product. Some told me they needed more features. Others said they didn't want the software at all. Feedback was helpful, but it also left me feeling overwhelmed. Then came the pivotal moment that would change everything. One afternoon, I got an email from a small business owner in a neighboring city. She had been using my software for a few months and was asking for a demo on how to integrate it with her existing systems. She was the owner of a successful bakery, and her email was straightforward, polite, and full of positive feedback. I set up a Zoom call, and we discussed how the software could improve her workflow. At the end of the call, she dropped a bombshell. "I love what you're doing here, and I think there's a huge potential for this. If you're willing, I'd love to introduce you to a few other business owners in my network who might be interested in using it." I was floored. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. She became my first advocate, and through her, I connected with more business owners who were willing to try my product. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. One bakery led to another, and then a small gym joined, followed by a local marketing agency. These small wins added up, and the user base started to grow at a steady pace. The feedback I received from these early adopters was invaluable, and it helped me refine the software into something that was truly useful. The next challenge was scaling. As the user base grew, I faced the daunting task of hiring a team. I needed to bring on more developers, customer support staff, and a marketing specialist to help take the load off my shoulders. Hiring was another learning curve. I was nervous about bringing people on board because I didn't have much experience managing a team, but I knew I couldn't do it all alone. Eventually, after nearly 2 years of grinding, the company reached a point where it was sustainable. We had a solid customer base, recurring revenue, and enough cash flow to hire a few full-time employees. We were no longer operating out of a tiny apartment. We moved into a small office, and I could finally breathe a little easier. Looking back, I see the importance of persistence. There were so many moments where it would have been easier to quit. There were days when I didn't know how I would pay the bills or where the next customer would come from. But through all the setbacks and failures, I learned to adapt, refine my approach, and keep pushing forward. The tech world is full of rejection and tough competition, but if you can weather the storm and stay focused on your vision, things will eventually come together. Today, my company is a profitable, growing business, and we've expanded into new markets. I'm still involved in the day-to-day operations, but I've learned to delegate and trust my team. I can finally say I made the right decision to bet on myself. I took a chance, and it paid off, not just in money, but in confidence and pride. I never could have imagined how far this journey would take me when I started out with just an idea and a few contacts in my phone. The key was perseverance, learning from failure, and never giving up. If you have a vision, don't be afraid to chase it. Just be prepared for the long, hard road ahead. This is a story about how I went from being broke and homeless to building a successful business that now provides a six-figure income. It's not your typical rags to riches narrative, but it's a story of persistence, self-doubt, and eventually, finding my way. I had always been a hard worker. Growing up, my parents didn't have a lot, but they taught me the value of a dollar. From a young age, I worked side jobs, mowing lawns, washing cars, and babysitting. I didn't mind, because I had a sense of purpose that I didn't fully understand at the time. I was driven by the idea that if you worked hard enough, things would eventually pay off. But when I turned 20, life threw a curveball I didn't see coming. I was in college, studying business administration, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. I had a part-time job at a local tech store, and I was on track to graduate in 2 years. Then my father passed away unexpectedly. I don't need to tell you how much that shattered me. He was the backbone of my family, the one who held everything together. I had no idea how to cope, and neither did my mother. She struggled emotionally and financially, and my entire world seemed to collapse. In the midst of everything, I dropped out of school. I thought I could take a semester off to get my head together, but I never went back. I ended up picking up a few low-paying jobs to help my mom out, and eventually, we couldn't even afford the apartment we were living in. It wasn't long before we found ourselves homeless, bouncing between shelters and sleeping in our car. The desperation was suffocating. I thought I'd hit rock bottom. But here's where things got interesting. I was living out of a rundown motel when I had an epiphany. I had nothing but time and a computer, so I started teaching myself coding. It started with HTML and CSS, then I got into JavaScript and some back-end development. At the time, it wasn't glamorous, but I was obsessed with it. I would spend hours in the motel lobby, drinking coffee, and learning everything I could about web development. Even though I was homeless, I had an idea that kept me going. If I could just get good enough at this, I could build something that would change my life. I ended up landing a contract gig with a local startup. They needed someone to build their website. The pay was modest, but it was enough to get me off the streets for a little while. It was a small victory, but it was enough to motivate me further. I moved into a cheap apartment and continued to work on my skills during the day while taking on more freelance work at night. Over the next 2 years, I slowly but surely built up my portfolio. I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was learning the ropes. During that time, I also began to read about entrepreneurship. I started to realize that I didn't just want to be a contractor forever. I wanted to build something bigger than myself. I wanted to create a business that could provide for my family, create jobs, and ultimately give back to the community. The breakthrough came when I decided to build my own startup. I wanted to create a platform that helped small businesses improve their online presence. I knew how hard it was to build a website from scratch, and I could see a gap in the market for an easy-to-use, affordable tool for entrepreneurs. So, I set to work building the platform. I didn't have much money to invest, so I bootstrapped the entire project, using my savings and taking on as much freelance work as I could handle. The first version of the platform was rough, but it worked. I launched it to a small group of friends and acquaintances, asking for feedback and offering free trials in exchange for reviews. At first, the response was lukewarm. I spent every waking hour fixing bugs and adding features, and I quickly realized that I needed more than just a decent product. I needed a marketing strategy. So, I dug into digital marketing, learning everything I could about SEO, paid advertising, and social media. I knew I had a good product, but the hardest part was getting people to notice. I started running Facebook ads, targeting small business owners, and offering free trials of the platform. Slowly but surely, the leads started coming in. At first, it was just a trickle, but over time, it grew. I started getting emails from business owners who loved the platform and were willing to pay for it. It wasn't long before I had enough paying customers to hire a small team. I brought on a couple of developers and a customer support rep, and we began scaling the business. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were months where I didn't know how I was going to make payroll. I had days where I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But I kept going, even when it felt like the world was against me. One of the hardest things about starting a business is the loneliness. You don't just have to deal with the technical challenges. You also have to handle the emotional weight of being the person everyone depends on. You're the one making decisions, carrying the responsibility, and facing the constant fear of failure. But after 2 years of grueling work, my business hit a tipping point. We had grown enough to secure our first round of investment, which allowed us to scale even further. We expanded our product offerings, hired more people, and refined our marketing strategy. Eventually, we built a customer base of thousands, and I was able to transition from being a contractor to being the CEO of a growing tech company. Today, my business provides a six-figure income, and I've been able to hire over 30 people. We're in the process of expanding internationally, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've built. But more than anything, I'm proud of the person I've become. I went from being homeless, lost, and directionless to building a company that changes lives. I learned that persistence, resilience, and the willingness to keep going when things are tough are the most important ingredients for success. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because I want people to understand that the journey isn't linear. There were countless moments where I thought about giving up, where I questioned whether I had what it took. But those moments are what define you. If you keep going, even when it feels impossible, you might just find yourself on the other side of that struggle with something you never thought possible. If you're in a tough spot right now, know this: it's not the end of your story. Keep pushing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. You don't have to have everything figured out. Just take the next step, and then the next one. One day, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. Believe me, I've been there. This is a story about how I went from barely scraping by in my small apartment to launching a six-figure business in less than 2 years. I'm not a genius, and I didn't have some big windfall of cash or an angel investor backing me. I just had an idea, a lot of stubbornness, and a willingness to work my butt off even when things seemed impossible. It all started back in 2022. I had just quit a job in tech because I was miserable. The pay was decent, but the long hours, the stress, and the lack of passion for the work were slowly draining the life out of me. I knew I couldn't keep going like that forever, so I took the leap. I decided to go full-time into entrepreneurship, something I had always dreamed about but never had the guts to pursue. At the time, I didn't even know what kind of business I wanted to run. I had a vague idea of starting an online company, but the specifics were unclear. I spent weeks researching different industries and reading success stories online, trying to find something that clicked. I wasn't looking for the next big thing, just something I could handle, something I could build with limited resources. Then one evening, I was talking to an old friend from college who had started a small e-commerce business selling eco-friendly products. We were catching up over a Zoom call, and she mentioned how difficult it was to find sustainable alternatives for everyday household items, like cleaning supplies, toiletries, and kitchen goods. That sparked something in me. I had always been passionate about sustainability, but it wasn't until that moment that I realized there was a real gap in the market for affordable, eco-friendly products. The next few weeks were a blur of research. I scoured the internet for suppliers, read countless articles on sustainable materials, and joined online communities where people discussed eco-friendly living. I was obsessed. I started sketching out a business plan on my laptop, but something kept bugging me. The market was already crowded. There were a lot of players in the eco-friendly space, so what would make my business stand out? That's when I came up with my idea, a subscription box service that delivered eco-friendly products right to your doorstep each month. But here's the twist: I wouldn't just sell random products. I wanted the box to be more like a discovery experience, where customers could find new, high-quality, sustainable products they never knew existed. It would focus on small, independent brands and feature a variety of goods, everything from shampoo bars to reusable food wraps to biodegradable cleaning brushes. I spent the next few weeks building the brand. I had zero experience in branding or design, so I watched a ton of YouTube videos on how to create a logo and build a website. I didn't have a fancy design tool or big budget, so I used free tools like Canva and Wix to put everything together. Looking back, the first version of the website was pretty bad, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had a product to sell, and I could always improve the design later. The next big hurdle was sourcing the products. I was on a tight budget, so I had to be strategic. I reached out to small businesses that aligned with my values and pitched them my idea. Some were skeptical at first, but I was persistent. After a lot of emails and phone calls, I managed to secure partnerships with a few suppliers who were willing to offer me bulk pricing, which allowed me to keep my costs low. By the end of 2022, I had launched the business. I had no marketing budget, so I had to get creative. I started by reaching out to eco-conscious influencers on Instagram and offering them free boxes in exchange for reviews. I also joined Facebook groups and Reddit communities where people were passionate about sustainability and posted about my product. Slowly but surely, the orders started trickling in. The first month was rough. I think I sold maybe 20 boxes, which barely covered the cost of the products and shipping. But I didn't give up. I continued posting on social media, working on improving the website, and adding new features like a referral program. I also started collecting customer reviews and feedback, which helped me tweak the service to better meet their needs. In the spring of 2023, things started to pick up. I had built a small but loyal customer base, and I had begun experimenting with paid ads. I wasn't making a ton of money, but the growth was steady. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, buying more products, improving the website, and hiring a few freelancers to help with marketing. Then, in the summer of 2023, something unexpected happened. One of my boxes got featured in a popular eco-friendly lifestyle blog. It was a game changer. Sales skyrocketed, and I was suddenly getting emails from all over the world asking how to buy my subscription box. It was like the floodgates had opened. By the end of 2023, my business was doing well into six figures. I had built a full-fledged team of 5 people, all working remotely. We had a customer service rep, a marketing specialist, a fulfillment manager, and a few part-time content creators. I was still hands-on with a lot of the day-to-day operations, but it was becoming clear that the business was no longer just a side project. It was a full-time operation. Looking back, it's crazy to think how far I've come in such a short time. I'm still far from perfect, and I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. But I've learned more in the last 2 years than I ever did in my corporate job, and I've discovered a new passion for entrepreneurship that I never knew I had. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, persistence, and a willingness to keep going even when things get tough. I've had plenty of sleepless nights and moments of doubt, but I've always kept my eyes on the bigger picture. And that's how I went from quitting my job in 2022 to running a 6-figure business by 2024. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If you're thinking about taking the plunge into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple. Just start. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to be willing to learn, adapt, and hustle. The rest will follow. How I went from broke to building a 7-figure business in 3 years. I never thought I'd end up being an entrepreneur. I grew up in a middle-class family where the idea of starting a business seemed like something only the wealthy or well-connected could do. But here I am now, running a successful 7-figure business from my small office in a rented apartment. Looking back, I still can't believe it all happened. This is the story of how I went from being completely broke to building a business I never imagined I'd own. The struggle in the beginning, it all started when I dropped out of college. I was studying computer science, but I wasn't passionate about it. I was doing okay in school, but I hated every single day. I spent my time thinking about how I could escape the 9 to 5 grind and live on my own terms. But with no business experience or clear idea of what I was doing, it felt like a dream that was always just out of reach. My family wasn't thrilled when I dropped out, and to be honest, neither was I. It felt like everything was falling apart. For the first few months after leaving school, I tried various side hustles, selling random products on eBay, doing freelance writing, and trying my hand at dropshipping. But nothing worked. I had zero experience in any of those fields, and I was too stubborn to admit that maybe I wasn't cut out for the entrepreneurial life. It was a painful cycle of failure, and every time I saw someone on social media claiming to be making money online, I felt more and more like a failure. By the time I was 22, I was in debt, living in a cheap apartment, and struggling to make ends meet. My car broke down, and I couldn't even afford to fix it. I felt like I was in a never-ending hole that I couldn't escape. That was the moment I realized something had to change. I could keep feeling sorry for myself, or I could find a way to turn my life around. The turning point, it wasn't until I read a random book on business and self-improvement that things started to click for me. The book wasn't revolutionary, it was just a simple guide on how to start an online business, but it shifted my mindset. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't destined to be a failure. I just hadn't found the right path yet. With a renewed sense of purpose, I decided to go all in. I picked up coding again, but this time with the intent of using it to build something of my own. I started learning web development at night, working odd jobs during the day to cover my rent. It was exhausting, but it was also the first time I felt like I was doing something that had a purpose. I spent the next 6 months learning everything I could about building websites, e-commerce, and marketing. I watched hours of YouTube videos, took online courses, and followed a bunch of entrepreneurs on social media who were doing things I aspired to do. Slowly, I began to understand how online businesses worked and how to use digital marketing to attract customers. But there was one problem. I didn't have a product. I knew I needed something to sell, but what? I didn't have the money to create a physical product, and I didn't have any unique ideas. That's when I stumbled upon affiliate marketing. The concept was simple: promote other people's products and earn a commission for every sale made through my link. It sounded too good to be true, but I figured it was worth a shot. Starting the affiliate marketing business, I spent weeks researching affiliate marketing. I learned about how to build websites, how to drive traffic through SEO and paid ads, and how to effectively promote products. I launched my first affiliate website in early 2018. It was a basic blog where I reviewed products I genuinely believed in, with links to those products on Amazon and other affiliate networks. The first few months were slow. I wasn't making any real money, but I was learning. I kept tweaking my website, learning about SEO, and working on improving my content. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't discouraged during those early months. But I kept going. Slowly, my website began ranking on Google, and traffic started coming in. By the end of the first year, I was making about $2,000 a month. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to prove to myself that this could work. I invested that money back into my business, upgrading my website, running more ads, and scaling up my efforts. The big breakthrough: by the second year of running my affiliate business, I was making closer to $10,000 a month. That's when I realized I had something bigger on my hands. But I also realized that relying solely on affiliate marketing was limiting my potential. The market was saturated, and I knew that if I wanted to continue growing, I needed to diversify. I began developing my own digital products. Since I had learned so much about online business, I created a series of online courses that helped beginners set up their own affiliate marketing businesses. I promoted these courses through my blog, leveraging my existing audience. To my surprise, they sold well. By the end of the second year, I was making over $30,000 a month between affiliate commissions and course sales. I realized I was on the brink of something huge. My goal shifted from just surviving to becoming a full-fledged entrepreneur. I hired my first employee to help with customer service and content creation. I built a small team, invested in better marketing tools, and started reinvesting more money into scaling the business. Taking the leap into bigger projects, by year 3, my business was doing over $100,000 a month. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to expand, reach more people, and diversify my revenue streams even further. I branched into launching software products that helped other marketers, and I expanded into different niches. My team grew, and I started working with some incredible people who shared my vision. We launched a podcast, a YouTube channel, and a membership site that offered exclusive content to our community. It felt surreal, but by the end of year 3, we were generating over $1 million a year. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were times when I felt like everything would fall apart, but I kept pushing forward. My biggest takeaway from all of this is that success doesn't happen overnight. There were no shortcuts, no easy wins. But the key is persistence, constant learning, and the willingness to take calculated risks. What's next? As I write this, I'm looking at scaling even more. I've invested in real estate, expanded into international markets, and launched new products. I still get the occasional imposter syndrome, but I'm proud of where I am. More importantly, I'm grateful for everything I've learned along the way. I'm not here to tell you that starting a business is easy. It's hard. It requires a lot of sacrifice, patience, and resilience. But if you're willing to do the work, it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do. I was once broke, confused, and lost. Now, I'm living a life I never thought possible. And it all started with a single decision to keep going, even when it seemed like there was no way forward. If you're in a tough spot right now, just remember, the only way out is through. Stay persistent, keep learning, and one day you'll look back and realize how far you've come. I used to be a broke 20-something who had no idea what I was doing. I didn't go to a fancy college, I didn't have connections, and I certainly didn't have a rich uncle or a trust fund. But what I did have was a fire in my belly, a belief that there had to be more out there for people like me, and an insane amount of determination. This is the story of how I built a company from scratch, struggled through years of mistakes, and eventually turned it into something that allowed me to quit my 9-to-5 job and live life on my terms. My journey started in a small, one-bedroom apartment in a city that was way too expensive for my paycheck. I had just turned 24, was working a dead-end job in retail, and feeling stuck. I remember sitting on my bed, scrolling through Instagram and seeing all these successful entrepreneurs. People around my age, making insane amounts of money, traveling the world, and living these perfect lives. I felt completely inadequate. But instead of letting that feeling paralyze me, I decided to use it as fuel. I wanted that life, but more than that, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. The problem was, I didn't have any idea where to start. I thought about opening an online store or doing dropshipping, but it felt like everyone was already doing that. I wanted to stand out, but I had no clue what niche to focus on. Then, one night, after getting home from my shift at the retail store, I was talking to a friend about how much I hated working in a job I didn't care about. He suggested, "Why don't you try something in an area you're passionate about? You love design. Why not create something with that?" That was the moment that sparked it. I'd always loved designing things, even though I never considered myself a graphic designer or anything like that. But I loved creating art, whether it was sketches or digital designs. I realized that I could combine this passion with my frustration about working a job I hated. So, I decided to dive into the world of creating and selling custom t-shirts. It felt like a safe bet at the time. There were already massive brands out there doing it, but I thought if I could create unique, high-quality designs that people could relate to, maybe I could carve out my own space in the market. I had no experience with e-commerce, no design software, and no budget to hire anyone. But I figured, how hard could it be? I'll just create a few designs, set up a simple website, and start selling. So, I taught myself how to use Photoshop through YouTube tutorials. I spent days researching how to set up an online store using Shopify, and within a few weeks, I had my first design printed and ready to sell. The first few weeks were brutal. I had no clue how to market my products, and my website looked like it was designed by a 5-year-old, which, to be fair, it kind of was. I made a couple of sales here and there, but nothing consistent. I remember celebrating when I made my first sale. Someone actually bought one of my t-shirts. But the excitement quickly faded when I realized that I wasn't making enough to cover the costs, let alone make a profit. I could have quit right then and there. The sales weren't coming in, my designs weren't perfect, and I was losing money. But something in me wouldn't let me give up. I was determined to figure this out. I started studying successful brands, reading books, watching podcasts, and reaching out to people who had been in the game longer than I had. I was relentless. Through all the research, I realized that my mistake was thinking that selling t-shirts was just about making cool designs. It wasn't. It was about marketing. It was about telling a story, building a brand, and connecting with my audience. I started to shift my focus from simply selling a product to creating a community around it. I decided to focus on designs that spoke to certain niches, things that I cared about, and things that other people were passionate about. I started with designs inspired by music, pop culture, and motivational quotes. But I quickly discovered that if I wanted to scale, I had to narrow down and cater to more specific audiences. So, I started focusing on designs that catered to niche hobbies and interests, things like gaming, fitness, and travel. I also started building my social media presence. I spent hours creating Instagram posts and stories, running small ad campaigns on Facebook, and engaging with every person who commented or liked my posts. Slowly but surely, people began to notice. One day, I woke up to a notification that a viral influencer had shared one of my designs on their Instagram. I couldn't believe it. That one post resulted in more sales in a single day than I had made in the entire month before. I didn't waste the opportunity. I reached out to the influencer, thanked them for the shout-out, and offered them a partnership to create exclusive designs for their followers. It was a risky move, but it paid off. The partnership grew my brand exponentially, and I started making sales consistently. But it wasn't all smooth sailing from there. As the business grew, so did the challenges. There were logistical issues, inventory management problems, and constant pressure to stay on top of new design trends. I had to learn how to manage my time more effectively, deal with customer complaints, and eventually hire a small team to help with order fulfillment and customer service. It took me about 3 years to get to a point where I was consistently profitable. I didn't pay myself for the first 2 years. Everything went back into the business. I reinvested every penny into marketing, upgrading my website, and expanding my product offerings. But once I started making a steady profit, I began to reap the rewards of all my hard work. At the 4-year mark, I reached a tipping point. I had grown the business to the point where it was generating enough income for me to quit my full-time job and go all in. I remember the day I handed in my resignation letter like it was yesterday. It was terrifying, but it was also the most liberating feeling I've ever experienced. Fast forward to today, and my brand has grown into a six-figure business. I've expanded into other product lines, and we ship internationally. I now have a team of 5 people, and we're working on launching new collaborations and expanding into retail. I've learned so much through the ups and downs, the mistakes and successes. The most important lesson, though, is that persistence is key. If you're reading this and you're feeling like you have no idea where to start or if it's even worth it, just know that every successful entrepreneur started somewhere. It doesn't matter if you have no experience, no connections, or no idea what you're doing. If you're passionate, willing to learn, and ready to hustle, you can make it happen. That's how I went from a broke 24-year-old with a dream to a full-time entrepreneur. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But I'm proof that if you keep going, even when it seems impossible, you can build something amazing. I was 23 years old when I decided to take the plunge into entrepreneurship, though I didn't fully understand what I was getting myself into at the time. I had just graduated with a degree in marketing from a mid-tier state university, and, like most of my classmates, I was hunting for a job. But unlike many of my peers, I didn't want to work for someone else. The idea of climbing some corporate ladder or punching a clock every day felt soul-crushing. I had grown up in a family where money was tight, but my parents always found ways to make it work. My dad worked 2 jobs for as long as I could remember, while my mom handled the household, which was chaotic enough without the financial strain. They were great people, but they weren't business-minded. They didn't understand the concept of investing in themselves to grow. That was something I picked up on my own, through books, podcasts, and just observing the world around me. It was a cold winter night in early 2018 when I decided I was done looking for traditional work. I didn't have the funds to start a big venture, nor did I have a network to lean on, but I was confident that the world of e-commerce could be my way in. I had heard stories of people making 6 figures selling products online, and I thought, why not me? The idea hit me after I watched a documentary about minimalism. I realized that people were becoming increasingly interested in decluttering their lives and simplifying what they owned. And I thought, what if I could sell minimalist products that spoke to this movement? I knew nothing about running an e-commerce business at that point, but I was optimistic and determined. I came up with the idea for a brand called Simplicity Co. that would sell minimalist home goods, sleek, simple furniture, decor, and lifestyle accessories. The name came to me quickly, and that was the moment I knew I could make this happen. But the first problem? Money. I had barely $200 in savings. This wasn't nearly enough to launch a full-scale product line, but I was stubborn. I figured I could start small, so I decided to begin by drop shipping, a method of selling products where I don't keep inventory. Instead, I partner with a supplier who handles shipping directly to the customer. No upfront costs. I spent weeks researching suppliers, trying to find a niche that was affordable yet high quality. After hours of trial and error, I landed on minimalist wall art prints. Simple designs, neutral colors, and lightweight materials. I created a website using Shopify, bought a domain, and worked late into the night perfecting the online store. At first, nothing happened. I'll never forget the sinking feeling I had when, after weeks of setup and optimization, I checked my website traffic, and it was abysmally low. In the first month, I made exactly 1 sale. 1. But instead of giving up, I did what any determined entrepreneur does. I learned from my mistakes. I researched SEO, paid ads, influencer marketing, and content creation. I joined Reddit forums, asked questions, and tested different strategies. Slowly, things began to improve. I started getting some traffic, and a few more sales trickled in. But even with these small wins, I wasn't making enough money to live off of. I was still working part-time at a local coffee shop to pay rent, but I spent every spare moment working on my e-commerce business. I was living off ramen noodles and cheap coffee. My apartment was cramped, and my car was barely running, but I had a dream. I poured every dollar I made from my coffee shop job back into Simplicity Co. Slowly but surely, I managed to build my brand's presence online. I started running ads on Instagram, reaching out to micro-influencers who resonated with my brand's minimalist ethos. At first, I didn't even have a solid product line. I was just selling prints, but the ads started working. I began getting more sales, and with that came more confidence. The breakthrough came about 6 months in, after I invested in a new batch of products: minimalist desk organizers, storage boxes, and high-quality wall shelves. This time, I didn't rely on drop shipping. I saved up a little money to order small quantities of inventory, hoping to reduce the risk. To my surprise, the products sold out faster than I had anticipated. By the end of 2019, I had cleared about $60,000 in revenue. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but it was enough to quit my job and focus on the business full-time. But I wasn't in the clear yet. The pressure was still intense. The industry was competitive, and I had to find ways to stand out. I doubled down on my branding. I redesigned my website, streamlined the shopping experience, and hired a freelancer to help me with customer service. I was also learning the importance of operations. Inventory management became a nightmare as I scaled. I had no idea how to forecast demand or handle shipping logistics. There were times when I was literally running to the post office to ship out orders myself. But over time, I built a team, first a small one. I hired 2 employees to help with order fulfillment and customer support. By the end of 2020, Simplicity Co. had become a legitimate business, pulling in over $250,000 in revenue. I started thinking bigger. In early 2021, I rebranded the company, expanded the product line, and focused heavily on creating a cohesive brand experience. I also started experimenting with content marketing. I collaborated with interior designers on Instagram, ran paid ads on Pinterest, and even began creating blog posts and guides around minimalist living. The goal was to get people to trust Simplicity Co. as the go-to brand for minimalist home products, not just another online store. By 2022, my revenue had surpassed $1 million. I couldn't believe it. I had gone from that one lonely sale in the first month to a full-fledged business that was making 6 figures a year. I had employees now, a warehouse for inventory, and even a marketing department. But with success came new challenges. The market was becoming saturated, and customer expectations were rising. The pressure never let up. I had learned, and was continuing to learn, that entrepreneurship wasn't just about the initial success. It was about adapting, evolving, and scaling. Today, Simplicity Co. is a thriving e-commerce business, and we're expanding into new categories like eco-friendly home products. It's been a roller coaster ride, and there were so many moments when I felt like quitting. But looking back, I know that those early struggles were the foundation of my success. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the entrepreneurial journey is rarely linear. It's full of highs, lows, and unexpected detours. But if you're willing to learn, adapt, and stay persistent, the rewards are worth it. I'm 30 now, and while I still have a long way to go, I'm proud of what I've built. I started with nothing but an idea, a tiny budget, and a whole lot of determination. And if I can do it, anyone can. I was 27 when I decided to take the plunge and start my own business. It wasn't an easy decision, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. But I had a dream, a vision, and a burning desire to break free from the corporate grind. Looking back, I realized just how naive I was, but I think that naivete is what fueled my determination. If I'd known then how hard things would be, I might have backed out before even starting. But I didn't, and in hindsight, that's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. Here's how I got started, struggled, and ultimately turned things around. It all started when I worked at a mid-sized tech company in a role I absolutely hated. I spent my days staring at spreadsheets, attending endless meetings, and pretending to care about metrics I didn't understand. The pay was good, and the benefits were great, but I felt completely uninspired. It was clear that I wasn't passionate about the work I was doing. I wanted more. I wanted to create something of my own, something that would make a real impact. I spent months tossing around different business ideas. I knew that tech was the future, but I didn't have the coding skills to launch a startup that required advanced programming knowledge. I thought about opening a physical store, but that felt risky, especially with the unpredictability of the market. Eventually, I landed on an idea that felt right: a subscription box service that would deliver curated tech gadgets to people's doorsteps every month. It wasn't the most original idea, but I thought I could put a unique spin on it. I envisioned offering high-quality, niche gadgets that weren't readily available in big box stores, targeting early adopters and gadget enthusiasts. I researched the market, calculated potential costs, and began creating a business plan. I didn't know it yet, But my first big mistake was thinking I could handle everything on my own. I started by sourcing products from different suppliers and manufacturers. I contacted a few small businesses and negotiated deals to get started. At the same time, I started building a website. It wasn't anything special, but I thought it looked decent for a first attempt. I wanted to launch the business as quickly as possible, so I rushed through a lot of the initial steps. I didn't spend enough time building a solid brand or creating a customer experience that would stand out in the competitive subscription box market. When I finally launched the business, I felt a sense of pride and excitement. The first few weeks were exhilarating. I made my first sale, then my second, then a handful more. I thought this was it. I was going to be rich and famous in no time. But things quickly took a turn. Orders started coming in, but so did issues. My suppliers were unreliable, and I didn't have a good system in place to track inventory. One month, I ran out of stock and had to send out orders late. Customers were upset, and many of them asked for refunds. I didn't have a solid customer service process, and the stress of managing everything on my own was starting to take its toll. To make matters worse, my website was glitchy, and I wasn't getting the traffic I expected. I'd spent all this time and money building it, but I hadn't invested enough in digital marketing. I relied on word of mouth and a few social media posts, but I wasn't actively driving traffic through paid ads or influencer partnerships. My growth was stagnating, and I began to feel overwhelmed. I remember one night, sitting at my desk, staring at the pile of unopened boxes in my living room, realizing I couldn't keep up. My personal finances were starting to take a hit. I'd invested almost all of my savings into the business and had started dipping into credit cards to cover expenses. I felt like I was sinking, and the idea of quitting crossed my mind more than once. But quitting wasn't an option. I'd come too far, and I was determined to make it work. I decided to take a step back and reevaluate my approach. I reached out to a mentor, someone who had been through the entrepreneurial grind and had successfully built and sold multiple businesses. She gave me some much-needed perspective. Her advice was simple, but it changed everything. Focus on what you do best and delegate the rest. I realized that I couldn't do everything on my own. I needed help. I hired a part-time assistant to manage customer service and social media. I outsourced website development to a professional, and I brought in a logistics manager to handle inventory and fulfillment. It wasn't cheap, but it was necessary. Slowly, I started to rebuild the business. With a team in place, I began focusing on scaling. I started running paid ads on Facebook and Instagram and partnered with influencers who could promote my subscription box. I revamped the website, improving the user experience and adding features like a referral program to incentivize customers to spread the word. I worked on creating a brand identity that resonated with my target audience and began offering better customer service to keep my subscribers happy. Things didn't turn around overnight, but they did start improving. We gained more subscribers, and the reviews started coming in. People were genuinely excited about the unique gadgets they were receiving, and the community around the brand began to grow. I made a conscious effort to listen to feedback and make improvements based on customer suggestions. One of the best decisions I made was offering a personalized touch in each box, a handwritten note, or a small surprise item that made customers feel valued. After about a year of constant hustling, I finally felt like I was on solid ground. My financials were in the black, and I was finally paying myself a modest salary. I even had enough to hire a full-time employee to help with marketing. The business was growing, but I knew it could still be better. I started expanding into new product categories, exploring partnerships with bigger brands, and streamlining operations to increase efficiency. By the end of year 2, we were profitable and had doubled our subscriber base. The brand was gaining recognition, and I began considering selling the company. But by then, I had grown attached to it, not just as a business, but as a part of my life. I wanted to see how far I could take it. In the end, it wasn't just the hustle that made my business successful, but the lessons I learned along the way. It was about pivoting when things went wrong, about understanding that I couldn't do everything alone, and about embracing the growth process. Entrepreneurship is full of mistakes, setbacks, and tough times, but it's also full of growth, self-discovery, and triumphs, no matter how small they might seem at the time. Looking back, it feels surreal. It's been 3 years since I launched my subscription box company, and today we've expanded into multiple product categories and are on track for our best year yet. I still have a long way to go, but I've learned to embrace the journey and the challenges that come with it. If there's one thing I can tell you about starting your own business, it's this: it will be harder than you think, but it will be worth it. Just keep going, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. If I can do it, anyone can. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.